Hello and welcome to Building DDoS Resilient Applications using AWS Shield Advanced. My name is Justin Kerpius. I'm an Edge Security GTM Specialist here at AWS, residing in Chicago. And I am happy to be joined by Chito Chimambo, who is a rockstar engineer within our Shield response team, or what we like to call SRT for short, here at AWS. So for the agenda, we're just going to do a quick overview and talk about kind of high level what we're seeing and why Shield Advanced. We'll then jump into some detail on the Shield service tiers. We get a lot of questions in regards to the difference between Shield Standard and Shield Advanced, so we'll cover that. Then we'll transition into the details of deploying Shield Advanced. And after that, we'll summarize kind of what we did in the deployment. And that'll be our transition over to discussing a newer feature that we've recently launched, which is our automatic application layer DDoS mitigation. So I'll talk about that from a high level. And then that's where I'll kick it over to Chito to jump in and do the demo of that feature. And then we'll round it out with Q&A. So as we discuss and we think about why Shield Advanced is needed and why security is important for application availability and responsiveness, we really always come back to three main pillars. And these three pillars are some key focus points for us here at AWS as we look to build services, and also what we're hearing from our customers, what's near and dear to their hearts. So starting with uptime protection, there's a lot that goes into building resilient applications in our cloud or in any cloud for that matter. So it's very important that we also have security that can tie into that, right? And make sure that out of all that hard work, we do not have a DDoS event that is causing problems, causing issues with your workloads or your applications. And then as you build and we accelerate the movement to the cloud, which we can look to the last 2 years of the global pandemic, which is kind of changing the lines of business and how they run their businesses. Scale is very important, right? And it might be a time in which scale is coming and the need for scale is coming, or it could be an unknown. But neither here nor there, your applications have to be able to scale, and we have to make sure that our security services scales with your environment. And that's really important, and that's how Shield Advanced can help. And then finally, compliance, right? Compliance is just about everywhere we go now, whether we're talking stuff like HIPAA, PCI, CIS, and we need to make sure that as our customers are looking to have visibility into what's compliant, that they can do that at scale and understand which services are compliant. So that's very important to the broader picture and security, and Shield Advanced brings that view as well. So with that said, for those of you that are unaware, so what is AWS Shield Advanced? So Shield Advanced is our DDoS protection here at AWS that allows our customers to scale and seamlessly add DDoS protection that's for mission critical applications so that we can help prevent issues and potential downtime from DDoS volumetric events. And I say this is kind of like a package because AWS Shield Advanced, when you subscribe, it comes with other services as well, and we'll cover that in more detail here shortly. But before I jump into that detail, I want to take a step back and kind of have some fun with an analogy. And we get a lot of questions on what the difference is between Shield Standard and Shield Advanced. So this is my attempt to answer that. And so for those of you that may have been trapped at your desk more than usual over the last 2 years, given the global pandemic, if you're like me, I like to kind of get out and go for what I call a Sunday drive, right? Or just jump in the car and maybe get out of the office, maybe go grab a coffee and just drive to where I don't have a time that I need to be there. It's kind of up to me, and I go at my own pace. So there's no need to get from A to B at a certain time. And if there's a problem, I'll figure it out, right? We'll take a different route. So that's one scenario. Then you may have another scenario where it's Monday morning, you have a very important meeting, it's in rush hour, and you need to be there at a set time. So you're going to need to approach that differently, right? You're going to have some tools, whether it's a GPS, you're going to have different visibility, and you want to be able to make changes as they come up. If there is potentially a problem in the roadway up above, which is backing up traffic, we need to figure out how to maneuver around that so we're there on time. That is Shield Standard versus Shield Advanced. So Shield Standard here at AWS is just, it's working behind the scenes. It's part of the infrastructure, and you're going to get that at no additional cost. And there's no visibility, no events. It's just there working, making sure that there's an open path. And then Shield Advanced is for mission critical applications. You get more capabilities, more visibility to what's going on, and you'll get some tools that you can put in place to help mitigate problems that are between A and B. So expanding on that, now we'll go into some of the deeper depths of what is involved with Shield Advanced. And so this will be the last slide. For the most part, I cover Shield Standard. So Shield Standard is in this blue box. And as I said, it's just working behind the scenes. There's no configuration. There's no visibility. There's nothing, right? It's just working. And so if a customer experiences potential lag or downtime with an application, or it's slower than normal, and if they're wondering if Shield Standards did anything with this, there's nothing to do, right? There's no visibility. It's just working. And so then in comes Shield Advanced, right? Like I said, for mission critical applications, if you need more, you need visibility and other tools, that's what Shield Advanced brings to the table. And Shield Advanced is in all of the orange boxes. So to the left, we have the services that Shield Advanced seamlessly ties into and protects. So services like Amazon CloudFront, our CDN at the edge, our Elastic Load Balancers, our AWS Global Accelerator, which was a newer addition to Shield Advanced protection, and then our Elastic IP addresses, to name a few. So when you enable Shield Advanced, these are the services that there will be seamless integration with. And so now let's talk about what is provided over and above Shield Standard. So with Shield Advanced, you're going to get not just layers, basic protection for layers 3 and 4. You're going to get additional protection at layers 3 and 4, along with all the way through layer 7. And that comes from a great synergy between Shield Advanced and our AWS WAF, which we'll cover in more detail here in a bit. You're also going to get resource grouping, and this is very important. As you engage with Shield Advanced, and you start using Shield Advanced, you're going to have resources that are all the same or specific resources. So as you look to expand those resources in the future, we have the ability for you to add a resource in that group that takes on what Shield Advanced knows of that group. Some of the baselines of the traffic patterns and what Shield Advanced is seeing, so that we can accelerate the known traffic for that resource and hopefully mitigate false positives. So if you're launching a new resource, you can just, rather than having that Shield Advanced learn the traffic over time and understand what's average and what's an anomaly, you can just put it right into that resource group, minimizing false positives and the time it takes to understand that baseline. So getting into the second row here, we start talking about notifications and the visibility into what's happening in your environment from a DDoS perspective. So we have a lot of cloud. You can set up CloudWatch event notifications. We have a new namespace within CloudWatch, which I'll cover here in a little bit. And there's SNS topics you can set up. So you're going to have visibility into what's going on and be able to set alerts on the happenings with those events. We also have, as part of the console, there's a DDoS threat environment dashboard that gives you visibility into kind of what's happening globally and also what's happening within your specific resources. And a big one here is the access to our Shield response team, or SRT. And when I kicked this off, I was very excited to have Cheeto step in and, at the end of this to do the demo. Cheeto works with the Shield response team, and this team is available 24/7 to help you with any potential problems you may have with DDoS events. And this can be both proactive and reactive. So we hope that we don't just get the possibility to engage with you when you're after you subscribe to Shield Advanced in a reactive state, meaning you have a problem. We have to reach out to SRT. You do have the capability to be proactive, and so what do I mean by that? We have a lot of customers that they know they have an event coming up, or it's their busy time of year, and they'll proactively reach out to SRT and set up time where they can go over their implementation and get feedback from a Shield response team engineer like Cheeto to help them understand if they need to make any changes or if there are any best practices that SRT recommend over and above what you already have set up. That's just one example. There are a number of other examples that you can be proactive with our Shield response team to get their feedback and their expertise on your environment. So that's kind of the visibility and some additional features. Now let's get into the third row, which is more of the features. So starting with adaptive layer 3 and 4 protection. So when you protect a resource with Shield Advanced, we're gonna understand that resource and look at anomalies and start baselining those resources so that we can start raising and lowering the sensitivity of those filters within our Shield Advanced service, depending on what we're seeing with the resources you're protecting. So it is more of a custom adaptive protection at layers 3 and 4. We're also with the integration with WAF, we allow for L7 anomaly detection, which gives us yet another layer and data point that we can look at to understand if there is a problem going on. We also have our health-based detection, and this is via Route 53 health checks. So essentially what you can do is set up a Route 53 health check for the resource that Shield Advanced is protecting, so that now if we take a step back, we may now we can put all this together, right? So we may have an anomaly either at layers 3 and 4 or through L7 anomaly detection. We can couple that with what we're seeing from the health-based detection. And so if we see that there is an event at layers 3 and 4 or with L7 anomaly detection, and we also see that the health check for this specific service in question is red or it is unhealthy, then we have a pretty good understanding that there's a problem here that we need to address. And this kind of flows into our proactive event response. So with proactive event response, essentially what this does is it takes, in the scenario I just mentioned, it will feed those findings into a proactive event response so that our Shield response team will understand, will see this, will understand it, and will proactively reach out to you, the customer, depending on who you put in the contact information who should be reached out to. And that could be via phone or email. And I'll cover more on that here in a little bit. So now we can understand what's going on. We can understand if it's really a problem. Because if, let's say we have an event that's triggered from what we're seeing with the adaptive L3 and L4 or layer 7 anomaly detection, but the resource is actually very healthy, it's responding, then maybe the response is different, right? We're not going to proactively reach out to you, the customer, at 2 in the morning. We'll create an event on this so that maybe the next working day you can come in and take a look at that and see what needs to be further investigated or looked into. And then the part that Cheeto will come in and address is our new feature, which is our automatic layer 7 mitigation. And so the way to think about this is now that, and we've had some customers ask, right? Like, so they like our proactive event response, but can we automate that, right? Rather than reaching out to us, calling us, emailing us, maybe in the middle of the night, there's got to be some automation. And that's really what automatic layer 7 mitigation brings to the table. I'll cover that in more detail here in a few slides. But so that's kind of like a high level of the tools within Shield Advanced that are provided to you once you subscribe. And now from a cost perspective, so from you heard me say WAF, right? With our L7 anomaly detection, there's some other synergies with WAF, AWS WAF, and AWS Shield Advanced. Well, when you subscribe to Shield Advanced, you're going to get WAF at no additional cost. Where WAF is in the same pathway of Shield Advanced. And so what I mean by that is if, for example, you're protecting a CloudFront distribution and you protect that CloudFront distribution with Shield Advanced, and you also set up a AWS WAF web ACL for that CloudFront distribution, you will get WAF at no additional cost as part of the Shield Advanced package. Now, I will kind of set up an asterisk here to say there are two managed rules within our AWS WAF that are premium rules over and above the free AWS WAF managed rules. That will be an additional cost, and so you'll see that in the console. And there are a number of other resources out there and videos on YouTube or within our AWS website that call this out and that point this out. So if you have any further questions on that, you can take a look at that. But net is if you set up Shield Advanced and you set up the AWS WAF and the web ACL associated to that resource you're protecting with Shield Advanced, WAF's going to come at no additional cost. Also at no additional cost will be our Firewall Manager, which I'll go into more detail here shortly, but really that's a way that we allow, or a service that helps you centrally manage Shield Advanced if you have a bigger deployment and you're not looking to jump into each individual account to configure it. And finally, we also have cost protection. So what this means is if you set up all of the features that we previously discussed and you have an event that still scales out your resources, and we can because you have all the features set up, we understand what the anomaly is, we understand what your baseline is. For DDoS events that we see over and above your baseline of usage that is from an event, we will cover the cost of the scale beyond your baseline. And so if you take a step back, what you can kind of have comfort with is our cloud can absorb our resources can absorb very large DDoS attacks. So if for some reason Shield Advanced by itself doesn't mitigate that before our resources start scaling out and there's an additional cost for you, we'll go ahead and cover that cost when you're subscribed to Shield Advanced. So as I discussed, I wanted to, typically every presentation that I cover, I always like to go over AWS Firewall Manager. And the reason is as I kind of discussed, this is the kind of the central pane of glass, if you will, that manages Shield Advanced. So depending on your situation and your scenario, if you only have a few accounts where you have to manage Shield Advanced, then you might not need Firewall Manager, because Firewall Manager helps you do that centrally through all your accounts at scale. But it also helps you manage, and obviously the discussion today is around Shield Advanced, hence the box, but it also manages our AWS WAF, which is important. You've seen some of the synergies, and I'll go into some more details on how Shield Advanced works with our AWS WAF. But it also manages essentially other layers of security, like VPS security groups, our newer AWS Network Firewall, and our newer Route 53 Resolver DNS Firewall. So you can manage all that centrally, but when you subscribe to Shield Advanced, any policies created within Shield Advanced policies or AWS WAF policies within AWS Firewall is at no additional cost as part of the package. And then I discussed compliance being very important for our customers in the opening slide. And so Firewall Manager is how we sync notifications and tie into AWS Security Hub so that we can give visibility into those resources that have an AWS WAF in front of them and that are compliant, or that have AWS Shield Advanced in front of them for DDoS protection and are compliant. All of that can feed through AWS Firewall Manager into your setup in Security Hub. So now we're going to get into how to deploy AWS Shield Advanced. But before I do that, I wanted to put here and call out our team has done a Herculean effort with updating a lot of our resources and creating some great technical blogs and some new how-to guides. So everything I'm covering today, you can find with these resources out there. And just to name a few, we do have a white paper that calls out our resiliency white paper that was updated recently, and that really takes a broader picture, helps everybody understand how they can use not just Shield Advanced and WAF, but also CloudFront, Route 53, and some of our other services to help with scaling out protection against DDoS events, amongst other things, right? So definitely go out there. You can go out on YouTube and search for new videos. You can go to our website and search for the technical blogs or the how-to guides under AWS Shield Advanced. So I wanted to call that out. It's very important. Some great stuff out there. So now I'm going to transition into the UI and into walking you through how you successfully set up Shield Advanced. So it starts in the console. You will search for Shield Advanced. And when you do that and you go to Shield Advanced, it's going to bring you to an area in the console where it'll show AWS WAF, AWS Shield, which is Shield Advanced, and then our AWS Firewall Manager. Now, this is all together, basically from what you've heard me say, right? The package for Shield Advanced includes WAF and Firewall Manager at no additional cost, and it just helps out when they're all in the same area. So the first thing you see when you go to the AWS Shield or AWS Shield here, you go to the overview, and you're going to see we have some areas that are red here. So we have to solve these red areas if you want to use Shield Advanced properly. So we're going to start with the first bit, which is subscribing to Shield Advanced. And as you subscribe to Shield Advanced, you have to check 4 boxes, and just basically to help you understand what you are getting into as far as subscribing to Shield Advanced. The first bit is Shield Advanced does cost $3,000 a month for a subscription fee. This is a flat fee. We do get a lot of questions on, well, what if I have multiple billing accounts, maybe a few different AWS organizations? That's okay. You only have to pay one $3,000 monthly subscription fee for your entire company-wide rollout. So that's the first part. The second piece is also understanding there is an additional cost of what we call data transfer out that's specific to the resources that you are covering. From that a previous slide, I mentioned that Shield Advanced can seamlessly protect CloudFront, our load balancers, your EIPs, or Global Accelerator, and there are associated costs, per terabyte of DTO, and you can see that on our website for those details. So there's an additional cost for data transfer out. You are also committing to a 1-year subscription, and then finally, the auto renewal will be in play. So if you want to turn off auto renewal, you absolutely can. So once you check those boxes and you subscribe, now we go back to the overview and we can see that is green. Now you're subscribed, but this is where it starts, right? So we have to do more than just subscribe. And the next piece is we need to protect resources. So to protect resources, again, you're going to see that the resources that I mentioned are protected by Shield Advanced. For this instance, we're going to focus on a CloudFront distribution. And so I've checked the CloudFront distribution box. We've grayed out the resource here, but we can see that I only have one CloudFront distribution, and that's okay. I'm going to choose that resource to be protected. And then the next step is it prompts you to create a web ACL that will be associated to that resource that you are protecting. So in this case, I already have a web ACL that is associated to that CloudFront distribution. But for this example, let's just say we're going to create a new one, which you can just create a new web ACL here. And so what we'll do is it prompts you to create a very important web ACL, or a rule within your web ACL, which is, and you can, by the way, you're naming the web ACL, and because we're covering the CloudFront distribution, it is a global service, so it automatically goes to global coverage. After you name the web ACL, when you hit create, we're going to create a rate-based rule, and that's very important to attaching a web ACL to a service. And what this rate-based rule allows us to do is in this case, what I'm saying here is if a particular IP has 1,000 hits within a 5-minute rolling window, then we're going to go ahead and move this to block mode for that IP until the total amount of requests are under 1,000 for a rolling 5-minute window. So you can see I put 1,000 here, and we have this in block mode. If you want, you can start it in count mode and see where that rule, what that's causing in your environment, and if you need to toggle that up or down. So then you add rule. And so now the next step is, and this is optional, but it's highly recommended, as you heard me talk about the benefits of Shield Advanced. Our health checks are very important. So this is where it will prompt you to build your health check for the resources you're protecting. Now, in this case, this pop-up, which is grayed out because it has the names, shows the details of our resources, we already had Route 53 health checks pre-built here, so we just chose that, right? But you do have the ability to create your specific Route 53 health checks, and there are a few flavors of that. We're not going to go into much detail on during this session on that, but there's a lot of information in some of the previous links that I had shared and out on our website and out on YouTube as well. So we'll go to next. And then you're prompted to create some alarms and notifications for the resources that you choose, the web ACLs you have tied to those resources, and any rate-based rules that you have set up that also tie to those resources. So you can pick your SNS topic, add those in this step, and then hit next. And so after you do that, now it moves you right to protected resources within Shield Advanced. And so now you can see we've successfully added a protected resource. That protected resource is shown here under protected resources. And we have the status. The status is green for this protected resource, and the health check is green as well. And the health check we set up, by the way, is a probe that looks at HTTPS requests and make sure that the response is a 200 response, right? So that tells us that that resource is up and running. That's just kind of some detail. And again, you can see that once you go through some of the documentation. So now we go back to the main overview page. So we've subscribed to Shield Advanced. We've protected that CloudFront distribution. Now the third step is we have to configure our AWS SRT support. And this is very, very important so that we can have a communication with our SRT and with, for example, the team that Cheeto resides in so that they can help with potential problems. So once we do that, we jump in and it gives us a few options. Mostly our customers choose option 3, which is choose an existing role that you will set up for access for SRT to get in to look at the S3 bucket that that has the events and the details and the logs. So in this scenario, we already have the role created. So we're going to choose existing and just add the role. You can create a new role. And if for whatever reason you're okay with doing this information yourself, you can choose not to grant access for SRT to the S3 bucket. So in this case, we're going to choose the role we already created and add that. So now that's green. So we go back to the overview page. We've subscribed. We've protected a resource. We've opened up access to SRT to help us with any potential problems. But now when we scroll down on this overview page, you're going to see down below that there are additional steps to engage proactive engagement. So we have to both enable proactive engagement to make sure that SRT is proactively reaching out to you when there's a problem, and we have to add the contact information for who will be contacted. So starting with the contact information, you can add email, phone number, and some notes on that particular contact. And once you add it, it'll add it below. We get a lot of questions in this area. Like, first of all, who do we add? And that's different for every customer, right? You can add your SOC, you can add your security team. It might be someone on the application team. You can add any and all. Or we actually recommend if you have an alias for, let's say, your security team, you can add the alias. And so what this does is it updates everybody. So when this is needed, our team is going to start going down all the contacts and reach out until they eventually connect with somebody so we can start the mitigation process. So now we go back to the overview page. You've added the context, so we're good there. Now we just need to enable the proactive engagement feature. So once we do that, it's very simple. You just hit enable. When we save that, now we can see it's green. There are some instances when you do this, it might say that the Shield response team is reviewing your request, and sometimes that could take a few hours for the Shield response team just to take a look at it, to verify that you've set up your contact information, to verify that some of the configurations are correct, and then once they overview it, then they do the final approval, and then it'll be green here under enabled. So that's how you properly set up Shield Advanced. Now, what I'd like to do is within Shield Advanced, you can on the left-hand side, you'll see events. And so what this allows you to do is view any DDoS events that are either in progress or that have been mitigated. So what you can see here of the CloudFront distribution that we are now protecting with Shield Advanced, we've simulated a DDoS event. And we can see that we do have a problem here. There is an event going on. It's a UDP type attack vector, and right now the duration has been 3 minutes. And then once the problem is mitigated, it's going to automatically update, and it'll be green and show that you had a problem. The duration was 3 minutes, and Shield Advanced mitigated that problem. And you can actually drill down on the details of that event. And so that's what this page is showing. You get a deeper dive on what happened, some of the details and the metrics of what happened, like how many bits per second, some of the mitigation metrics. So there is a good level of detail that you can look into to get a feel for what happened and how this can be prevented going forward. So you really start to see with Shield Advanced, you get a lot of added visibility, some of the added features versus, again, this is for mission critical applications. For Shield Standard, that would be something where you have a resource that's not mission critical and you don't need all this granular visibility into what may be happening with that resource. So when we talk about setting up SNS topics and CloudWatch, we actually recently created 3 new categories under the DDoS protection namespace within CloudWatch. So the 3 categories are, starting with the first one, which is the attack vector. So we have a number of different scenarios for each different attack vector. We also have currently under attack namespace, which will show us which resources are experiencing attack like in real time. And then we also have namespace that shows how many packets we've passed and dropped for the specific events that we experienced with Shield Advanced. So we'll probably look to add to that going forward, but it's worth calling out that that's already built out for you. And so as you build out your SNS topics and you work with CloudWatch for your event notification, that detail has been added for you. So what I'd like to do is just take a step back and recap everything we just went over, which is the deployment process. What do? We subscribe to Shield Advanced. We specified the resource that you will protect. And by the way, when you specify that resource, as you saw in our example, we just had the one CloudFront distribution. If you have multiple resources, it'll automatically populate all your other resources, and you can protect all those resources by checking all and do that at scale. So, but second piece, we specified the resources to protect, and then we assigned or created a new web ACL for that protected resource. In this example, we already had one, but we created a rate-based rule. We then created and assigned the Route 53 health check. We also created alarms and notifications, and we looked at some of the details of that. And then we enabled the proactive DDoS response. So those are the steps. That's the summary. And to take another step back, so what does this mean for your environment? And so what I have here is I'm showing a common deployment model that we see our customers use. So what you have here is you have a number of the services that are probably near and dear to most of our hearts. We've seen a lot, starting with traffic using our Route 53 DNS resolver. So in this scenario, the traffic comes back out, and we can either, one, have CloudFront at the edge, and that's where Shield Advanced is seamlessly integrated along with our AWS WAF. Or in a different approach, you could have WAF and Shield Advanced on the load balancer in front of your resource. So this is just one example, right? There's a lot of flexibility, for some customers that have mission critical applications that are very need more on the faster uptime and less latency. We do introduce our global our AGA service, which is our global accelerator, and Shield Advanced ties in a global accelerator. So I'm saying this because you have a lot of flexibility for where you put Shield Advanced. But I'm showing you this because all of the steps that we just went through, you can do all of those and just tie it into whether it's CloudFront at the edge, whether it's your load balancer within your VPC closer to your resource. So you have a lot of flexibility in setting up edge protection with AWS. And so now what I want to do is I want to transition over to that new feature that I discussed. We launched this feature about 3 to 4 months ago. It is our automatic application layer DDoS mitigation feature. So what this does, if we go back to the process of right now, we have proactive event response. And really what that does is it once we see an event in a protected resource that's protected by Shield Advanced, our Shield response team would typically reach out to your team, and then there would have to be some communication to say, okay, can we fix this for you, or do you want to fix this yourself? Here are the IPs that need to be added to an IP table to help fix the problem of this volumetric DDoS attack. So typically, that's obviously a manual model. So this feature helps us automate that. And so we do that by setting up a managed rule within our AWS WAF. And so what happens is the anomalies that we see and some of the events that we see, our Shield response team and Shield Advanced can automatically put that fix in that managed rule within our WAF so that we can automatically mitigate the problem rather than calling you or your team maybe at 2 a.m, telling you what's going on and asking if it's okay if we mitigate that, or if you want to take the recommendation and mitigate it yourself. So this is a pretty big step for us. So a call out here is with all of our managed rules, you can start in count mode just to kind of observe what's going on. And actually our Shield response team, we start with a kind of count mode to kind of in real time to get an understanding of if we deploy this, what does it mean? And then we do that in an accelerated fashion so that we can then put it into the managed rule. And then you choose in that managed rule if you want that to be in block mode or if you want it to be in count mode before, if you want to just kind of view that and make sure you don't break anything or there's no false positives, you can get a feel for what that looks like and then put it in block mode at your own pace. So there's no manual intervention here. We manage that. And the other thing I'll say is over time, right? Typical, all of us security professionals know, these rules and managed rules and web ACLs can get pretty extensive over time, right? So just know that as part of this managed rule, our Shield response team and Shield Advanced is doing ongoing management of that rule. So typical DDoS events are short in nature, around 5 to 7 minutes. So after the event, we're monitoring that managed rule so that we can update that and pull old stuff out of the rule, keeping that rule smaller, less footprint, and more important to some of the anomalies that are going on in your environment. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Cheeto, who's going to do a deep dive on this new feature and help you understand how to turn on this new feature in the console. So without further ado, Cheeto, go ahead and take it away.
My name is Cheeto Chimambo, and I'm a security engineer on the Shield response team. Today I'm going to show you how to set up Layer 7 automatic mitigation for your application load balancer. Currently on the page, I'm on the start page of the Shield console. This is the getting started page that gives you a bit of details regarding the threat landscape for Shield service, as well as some of the events that we've seen in the past for the account. To add a protected resource, you go to protected resource on the left-hand navigation panel, and you'll see a list out of your currently protected resources. Today, I want to be adding this application load balancer called Shield Web App that already has a web ACL associated with it called Web App ACL. In this Web ACL, you can see there's existing rules today, which is one managed rules with the Shield Amazon managed rules, as well as a Shield rate-based rule. Going back to my Shield console, I will click in the protected resources section. I will click on add resources to protect. Since I want to add a application load balancer, I'm going to uncheck the other resource types and leave application load balancer, as well as I'm going to select the region of my application load balancer, which is US East 1, North Virginia. I will click on load resources and my resources will load. Here I have 3 load balancers that have not yet been added as a protected resource. So since I only want to add this one called Shield Web App, I will select it. I will then click on Protect with Shield Advanced. At this point, that application load balancer has been added as a protected resource, but I'll go on with the wizard in order to add automatic application layer DDoS mitigation, also known as Layer 7 automatic mitigation. Since we don't already have this enabled, I will click on Enable. Once I click on Enable, I'll have an additional drop-down that allows me to either select Count or Block. Count is a good setting to use when you're initially trying this service and you don't want it to take action. Rules that match the count rule will not be blocked. However, if you've already tested this and you want to add this in production in block mode, you can select block at this point. For this demo, I'll just keep it in count. Below that, I'll have the option of adding a rate-based rule to my web ACL, but at this moment, I won't be adding another rate-based rule because I already have one, as I showed earlier. At this point, I'll just click Next. I won't be adding any health checks, although we do recommend adding health checks to take advantage of a proactive engagement, but for this specific demo, I won't be adding a health check. I'll just click on Next. Again, for this demo, I won't be adding an SNS topic for DDoS related alarms. However, in your production, we actually recommend that you have this so that it can alert on-call operators. I'll click Next here. Here we get a review section of what we're planning on adding. You can see the resource that has been added to be protected, and I'm happy with that setting. I'll click on Finish Configuration. Once this happens, I'll look for my load balancer just to confirm it's been added. I don't think it's on my first page. It should be on my second page. We can see it listed here, which is Shield Web App. You can see here that under the automatic application layer DDoS mitigation, I now have enabled with count action. If I go to the WAF tab, which I have here, and refresh this page, I should see I have a new rule group within my WebACL. This rule group is set up and managed by the Shield Advanced service, and we will add rules that match signatures when a layer 7 DDoS mitigation is detected. For now, there's no rules in here as there's no currently active event, and as the owner of the WebACL, you don't have control to update or look at any rules within this rule group. This is fully managed by the Shield Advanced service. And that's all there is to creating layer 7 auto mitigation for your resource.
Thanks a lot, Cheeto, for showing that demo. We are now at the end of the session, so first I want to thank everybody for your time. Feel free to leave your comments and feedback and rate this session to help us understand how we can better help you going forward. And so with that, I want to thank everybody once again, and now we'll open it up to Q&A.